Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Heartwell dev stream, the live stream series where I can continue to develop this adorable Souls-like action RPG with platform mechanics and multiple endings. If you find these dev streams interesting or helpful, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and boot that bell button to stay notified. Now, when we previously left off chat, we were working on the settings and attitudes menu, and that's what we'll be continuing to work on today. But, got some good news. I've actually made some progress since last time. So, obviously, you all have seen the, well, actually, I'm not even sure if you guys have necessarily seen this yet, but I've got all the, obviously, most of the counters working and tested. So we got our chronometer working, we got the various items collected. We have the, this will need updated, but we have number of monsters defeated. We'll have number of bosses defeated. Of course, we have failed attempts. But more importantly, off-stream chat, I actually got the music and sound effects volume settings working. So you'll notice there isn't any music in this particular frame. This is the testing frame. But as you can see, we can adjust it just like that. Go all the way to a minimum, or vice versa. Now, obviously, you can't hear the difference here because there's no music on this particular frame. But with the sound effects volume, it will become a lot more obvious because just listen carefully, chat. So, as you can clearly hear, well, interesting. Okay, well, looks like we found ourselves a bug, chat. I mean, obviously the ranged audio is correct, but the melee audio, that will need some updates. Let's, check audio for melee attacks and make the action in all frames. Where are those being adjusted with the sound effect? Well, this is why we test things, Chad. But on a more positive note, you'll notice that we can't actually hear the sound of the rocks being thrown. But if we adjust that, now we can hear that. Also, Jay, thank you so much for this tier 1 stuff. I really appreciate it, man. Jay says, definitely a fan. The enemy attacks especially felt too loud in the demo. That's a fair point. And obviously, you know, options are one of those things that are, it's just something that you expect in a game. So I figured, like, I've already added the ability to change it from the main menu, but obviously being able to change it in game would also be helpful. So the addition here will obviously be a welcome change, so people can make the audio kind of fine tune it to their to your heart's content. Now, that being said, as we just discovered, there is a bug here. The melee audio for this, at least in this frame, I'll have to check the other frames, doesn't seem to be adjusting the sound effect volume. Now that should be a fairly straightforward fix, I just need to find where the audio is in my frame, but we'll go from there. Also, chat, I will mention, fun fact about the, what you just saw there in the settings menu, that is actually my very first usage of what are known as parent and child events in Fusion 2.5. So this is a new-ish feature with the Clickteam Fusion 2.5 plus DLC. Or I should say it's not new-ish, it would have come out with the DLC. But basically, you can in essence have events that are sub-events of a main event. And you might say, well, okay, Antom, it looks like you've just moved the events down a tab. What's the big deal here? The big deal, chat, is that any line of code that is in the parent event, so in this case this event up here, is applied throughout all the sub-events, or the child events. What does that mean? Well, what it means, chat, is, in the case of like this line of code, for example, anytime there is an or statement here, in the past, if I want this to all be one line, I would have to make every single one of these chats for every single one of these or statements. Not only is that a really tedious process, it was also very inefficient from a programming perspective because you're running the same check over and over and over and over again. Whereas with this kind of system, it is now possible to actually just say, okay, stuff that's the same, put it up top, and then anything that's different, you can kind of outline out. And you can have multiple child events as well. So if there's a situation, like here, for example, chat, if there's a situation where you need to have like the same base event, but for different circumstances, like here would be for different types of buttons, you can do that. So that's something I'm very excited to make use of as I continue to work on Heartwell. But for now, let's see if we can find that melee audio and check what's what the adjustments is. Oh, well, speaking of things that need adjustment, that's going to need adjustment because I'm noticing that's not being adjusted for sound effects volume. Let's you know, chat, we probably should take this moment to actually test what sound effects are and aren't being changed properly. So what? I take it back. They're all right. Well, that is bizarre. All right, well, clearly there's some more audio problems going on than I originally anticipated. Let's, I think we need... I think tonight's chat is going to be a deep dive into our audio section here, because clearly something isn't quite right here. For melee attacks, ranged attacks, and footsteps. Okay. So... I'm thinking... Wait, you know what it is? I think I know what this is. No, I'm trying to run that. Let's, Okay, so that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, okay, so, oh, cool. Hey, Dr. Nicholson, thanks for dropping by. How's it going? Welcome, everyone. So, what I just realized, chat, is I think my testing frame actually doesn't have the set volume stuff equation set in there yet. But everything else does. So, for our little test, we're just going to, well, it's set to 0 right now. Yep, okay, that's what I thought. Well, almost what I thought. Oh, right, because I didn't set the audio correct on that one. Okay. Yeah. So you'll notice, chat, at least here, we cannot hear the sound effects as I have muted it. Just blow up a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so no audio. Good. But there was that one instance that was incorrect, and that, of course, was the... I think the stuff that's brand new. In this case, the new menu section. So let's fix that. So for those who are just joining, we are in the process of fixing some audio bugs. Alright, that should fix that. Yep. I don't remember if we programmed this. No, we didn't program it here yet. Okay. Back to the testing frame we go. Alright, so what we're going to do, chat, is fix, do some fixing of the audio, at least in our test frame, so that's following things properly. Because now that I think about it, I haven't actually used the testing frame for... When I was making the Heartwell demo, I was really focusing on these 3 frames right here, the central well, the lower well, and the depths. But as a result, that test frame kind of was left to his own devices, and that has left some things that need to be updated. Like, for example, this. So let's make sure it's the sample. Footsteps 113. In theory. Yep, okay, that muted that. Oh yeah, I did notice it was very cold today, chat. I mean, at least where I'm at, it's the coldest it's been in almost 10 years. So definitely important to stay warm if you're going outside. Like, I remember just the other day, chat, I was trying to down in my car early in the morning so I could drive to work, and what happened was I went to scrape the off the top of my windshield and noticed I couldn't quite see inside, and that's because it was so cold that there was actually frost already frozen on the inside of my windshield as well as the outside. So I had to like take my little windshield scraper and scrape the interior of that. Jay says bushfire season in West Australia, 45 plus degree days. Is that 45 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius? Or Kelvin? I'm assuming that's Celsius. Ah, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. That is really warm. Definitely stay hydrated out there. That definitely sounds like it get very, very warm. Though I guess that makes sense because the seasons are opposite if you're in the upper hemisphere versus the lower hemisphere. So like if it's winter up north, that means it's summer down south and vice versa. And that kind of reminds me, chat. It's like seeing all these degrees. I'm wondering. I've noticed these degrees. I'm remembering. Oh wait, this game also has its own temperature system. But it's different from all that. It's in Gemini. So I don't remember exactly how it correlates to like Kelvin or Fahrenheit off the top of my head. But there is a logic to it. Let's see here. So it's a sample dashing version. Okay, 2.1. All right, and since we're all here, chat, I know that we're still, I'm still very much in the, working on a lot of manifest UI stuff recently because of some tabs that need to be added. So we have the settings and ACES tab that needs to be added, that needs to be implemented. There's the essentially the logbook tab, or I think I'm calling it Dorothy's Diary, that needs to be added. But I'm curious, chat, in the long-term development process, what are you most interested in seeing in terms of on these dev streams, or what are you most looking forward to long-term? Because I know for me, in terms of like the things I'm really looking forward to developing are definitely going to be the boss fights, the levels, and then of course off-stream the character writing for the major characters in this game. Those are the three things that definitely keep me going in terms of levels of excitement. And then slightly below that would be design all the weapons, design all the enemies. and I'd probably say determine what the treasures are. Hopper says, you think we should make Earth have a second sun, like a binary star system like Tatooine? I mean, to each their own. If you really like deserts, Topper Nicholson, that's up to you. Jay says, new weapons, animations, effects, stats, balance changes. No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, new weapons and stats and balance changes will be fun because you know, there's going to be a total of 60 of them, so 30 melee weapons and 30 ranged weapons. I already know, at least notionally, what each of them are, at least in terms of their names. But balance-wise, that's something I'm still that's something I'm still trying to hammer out the fine details for. But I at least have a method to my madness in terms of actually how to balance all that. And the way I'm doing it is I've basically created myself a little Excel spreadsheet, or this is a doodle sheet, but the point is it's a doodle sheet where I list out all the different weapons, both melee and ranged weapons, and then I essentially give them like a number in order to rank their relative performance. But that number is not meant to be like its actual physical damage or like its stamina or ammo consumption or things like that. No. Rather, the number, yes, and you'll try to keep some secret for the release, but I'm curious on seeing your creative process when it comes to implementation. Oh, that's fair. Well, I will say that there are definitely some weapons I will try to keep secret until the until the game's actually out, because spoiler reasons. But I would say for the most part, when we finally get to actually adding more weapons and testing them out, the way I'll handle it is I will deliberately leave the lore bits for them blank, or like put in a placeholder lore bit that says something like, this is a weapon, and then just that's it. So that way, even when I'm just randomly doing stuff, it's not like revealing things too early. But as far as implementation goes, I mean, the process will be very similar to how I implemented the axe melee weapon. So I don't remember if I did that on stream, but the method is there is a subsection here for melee and ranged weapons. And each weapon itself will have its own group of events that represents the actual code for it. So I have to come up with custom equations whenever I create a new weapon because of how the special things look. Jay says, divine looking hammer made from the bones of a god. Flavor that's neat looking, ain't it? Amazing. That is exactly the sense of humor that this game knows for. Okay, but in all seriousness, like for example, this is like, you'll notice here that right now I'm in like the melee weapons, melee combat section. There's a whole like specific stats. So the fists have like their own calculations, and each calculation is tied to a specific variable. And the idea, chat, is that I purposely in my save file array set aside like sections of the array to have essentially just values that I can edit and do what I want with. So in other words, they are literally just empty placeholder values for variables. And then in here is where I would define what those variables actually mean and do. So in the case of fists, if a special allows you to gain a base amount of light damage, since that's I think that's the Holy Hand special, then there is a value somewhere that enables me to do that in one of these calculations. So essentially having special things to recognize that. Copper Nicholson asks, what kind of swimsuit do you think Dorothy he would wear? I mean, the thing is, chat, Dorothy can't swim. Like, that's she does not know how to swim. So I guess if she was going to wear a swimsuit, it probably would just be as a costume, because that would. I'm just talking in general. Like, if Dorothy was hanging out with friends and was going to wear a swimsuit, it would probably solely just be for fun, because she doesn't know how to swim. And I agree with Jay. It would be something impractical, probably like a one-piece sort of wetsuit is what I would say. But again, Dorothy can't swim. So there's that. You're going to Elf, but why though? But yeah, so essentially, you might be asking though, Antomicx, why do you define so many variables here for this? Can't you just enter in the values directly? And the answer is you could, but if I ever had to do any kind of balancing, I would have to edit in every single frame, and that's no fun. She can't swim, but she can surf. What? I mean, if by surf you mean like just like slide across a table or something, I guess so, but... Oh, wait, no, I know what you mean, You mean because she can dash, you know, like this. I mean, there's no audio right now, but... Let's fix that. That's the different one. She can surf, you know, surf, dash. Fun fact, chat, if you do want to move the fastest, like the largest distance possible in the shortest amount of time in a straight line, it is actually faster to just spam dash as opposed to sprint. So while sprinting is easier to control, if you were to just dash like multiple times in a straight line, it will actually be faster. So you notice how quick that is versus that. Now, that being said, I'm getting a bit off topic here. So essentially, anytime I define a new alterable value, I have to determine what each thing does in the equation, then tie those to variables that if I ever need to rebalance things, then I can just do it from a central location. Godfrey Nicholson, I know you played the Heartwell demo, and I don't think shy necessarily describes Dorothy particularly well. I can understand scared to an extent, but there's also kind of a courageous brashness that Dorothy has. It's very much, it's like, I know I'm scared, but I can't give up. Chaotic neutral, what? I would probably, if we were going to go with like the alignments, Dorothy would probably be under... I'd probably say chaotic good. That's probably how I would describe her. But that's grossly oversimplifying things. Where were we? All right, audio. And these adjustments. All right, that's all adjusted. Jay says, your favorite Dorothy moment is asking a blacksmith to reinforce her fist. Yeah, that was a fun one to write. That was a fun one. That's a good moment. I mean, to be fair, in the Souls games, there are fist weapons like the Castus, for example. So I was kind of making fun of that. But I mean, actually, just that whole sequence was very much poking fun at the idea of blacksmiths in Souls games. Just think about it, chat. Why is it that these blacksmiths are willing to like offer their services to these random strangers who they've never met before in such a dangerous land? And also, just the amount of stuff you can upgrade in those games. So I definitely wanted to poke fun a bit at that. But also in a way that felt believable and not just kind of out of left field. As those who know what scene Jay is referring to, you will know that the person who reacts to Dorothy, I would think it's fair to say that her reactions are entirely justified, given the circumstances that they encounter each other. He needs war gloves, knuckle duster, striking crumpets, or something like that. Oh no. Oh no. It's only the origin of Iron Fist. Oh no. He needs like ward walls or something. Yep. But yeah, so circling back to like developing the new weapons for the video game. Like I said, there are a handful of weapons that I will do my best to like keep hidden off stream for, you know, spoilery reasons. But for the weapons that aren't like that, those weapons are all completely fair game for me to develop on stream at some point. So like the animations, the damage equations and all that, the unique ideas. And it's funny you mentioned war gloves, because there is actually a glove weapon called like the flame gauntlets or fire gauntlets. I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but basically they're metal gauntlets, and what they do is when you might have, Jay, you might have even seen this me drawing the animation for that particular weapon while I was when I was still just drawing the animations a while ago. But essentially the way they work is when you punch forward with the gauntlets, they release a mist of a flammable liquid or a flammable mist. And then when you pull back, the exterior of the gauntlet is fitted with a catalyzing agent. So basically, the act of throwing your fist forward creates the puff of flammable mist, and then pulling your fist back ignites that flammable mist. Or in other words, it is a very sci-fi way of explaining what is effectively the catch flame or combustion spells from pyromancies from Dark Souls or Elden Ring. So in other words, you can quite literally punch a fireball. Will that be a failure as a melee weapon? No, that would not be balanced in the slightest. Actually, Copper Nicholson, what was your favorite moment from the Heartwell demo so far? Jay's already shared their favorite moment, which was Dorothy asked Dana Blacksmith to upgrade her fists. Oh yeah, there was a demo, Copper Nicholson. You played it before. All right, so let's pull this one open, line 199. No, you played a demo, Copper Nicholson. You made some choices. You did things. Jay says, favorite character moment was the fist. Favorite story moment was finding the secret room. Oh yeah, that's a fair point. So honestly, Jay, what was your reaction to finding the secret room? I don't remember if I got to see your reaction to that or not. Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of funny when you call it the secret room, because secret is kind of is in a way kind of an oxymoron, because saying it's the secret room and having it also be the first room you wake up in. But I get what you're saying, like the secret spot in that room. Because I will say, saying up that Jay says you expected something like that, but was very intrigued. Fair enough. Yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun with that one, because like I said, I am very inspired by the Souls games, and one thing that the Souls games do that I really liked was the concept of illusory walls, and the idea that any wall could potentially have a big secret behind it. So the way I handled that secret in Heartwell was I tried to make it a bit more quote-unquote realistic for how an illusory wall would work in, I guess, more of a sci-fi setting. So in this case, it's a wall that is that you can't just bash open or anything like that, but if you follow a certain set of steps, I won't say exactly what those are, so that if you've never played the demo before, you can figure that out for yourself. There is a way to actually get that particular wall to open and reveal a hallway that was not otherwise accessible or visible. And that hallway will lead to a set of stairs that leads to the secret. Yeah, I like how you had to go out of the way to find it, and it also gives the player the reason to keep looking for secrets and find more orbits. Oh, I agree, and that was definitely the intent as well. And also, fun fact about that secret room lore bit, that particular lore bit is actually worth more wisdom at speed than any other individual lore bit in all of Heartwell. like, I deliberately made that particular lore bit worth more wisdom XP because you have to do multiple steps to actually get to it, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's difficult to find, but it's definitely not something you're going to find without going out of your way to explore at least a couple of areas in depth. Also, similarly, if you happen to encounter any alternate lore bits, those are worth, I think it's about 50% more wisdom compared to their normal counterparts. So it is definitely in your best interest as a player to think about, okay, is there some way with this lore bit that I could potentially make it so that the logic of it wouldn't necessarily make sense? You're very well, the name was when the snake gave Dorothy an apple, and Jay says, this is Heartwell, not to put it at Genesis. I mean, true, but also, apples, Dorothy loves apples. Like, that's a well-established fact that Dorothy loves apples. Alright, so we got that volume there. Alright, next up. We learned so much today. Dorothy can't swim, loves apples. I don't know if the can't swim, like, I know that the can't swim part wasn't mentioned in the demo, but the loves apples, that was definitely mentioned in the demo. Like, there's a lore bit that says, I think it's the lore bit when Dorothy is going through when Dorothy is looking through the different menu items in the cafeteria in Heartwell, or sorry, the mess hall in Heartwell. And she basically says that the food would get kind of boring, especially without apples, since those are her favorite. Dorothy's not a carpenter. Dorothy's a guidance counselor, Copper Nicholson. That's a well-established fact. I mean, let's be completely realistic, though. That joke about Dorothy being a bad carpenter is probably quite accurate, considering that Dorothy is not, well, shall we say, mechanically inclined. To quote one of the lore bits from the demo, if anyone asks Dorothy to do anything with, like, electronics, for example, the most she would be able to do is tell the difference between a red wire and a blue wire. Okay, that volume set correctly. Okay, this one needs adjustments. Okay. Let's see here. No, Robert Nicholson, no. Set the volume of more for 2 to that. Alrighty, we got that. Yeah. I'm trying to remember what we were talking about before. Oh yeah, weapons. So the way I balance weapons in this, the way I'm going to try and balance weapons is relative to each other. So in other words, in different areas, like damage, ammo consumption, other kinds of effects, etc., I essentially like categorize the weapons into different categories and then rank them from like 1 to 30. With I think the way the numbering scheme I did work is that 30 is the strongest and 1 is the weakest in that relative category. And by ranking the weapons relative to each other, that allows me to balance them better because it helps me figure out what sort of niche each weapon is supposed to fulfill. And for weapons that are just kind of, they don't really stand out in a particular way, then I can find other ways to give them some other, we'll say, X factor or uniqueness to them so that they have a purpose. Or at least that's what I'm trying to do with my weapon balancing spreadsheets. But basically I start by first comparing the weapons to each other, then I would develop essentially a range of relative effectiveness for any particular type of stat, and then I would apply those values accordingly. And that's how I plan to at least get the initial balance for the various weapons in the game. Alright, Copper Nicholson. Thanks for dropping by. I hope you have a good rest of your night. Okay. Something else that's been fun, chat, is the level design. I don't know if I've told you all this, chat, but I've, for those who have been following the Discord server, and particularly the Heartwell updates channel, you're probably well aware that I've been designing, essentially outlining levels off stream. And you might say, how am I making so many of these level outlines? And the way I do it is I actually use like a book and some a book filled with graphing paper and a pencil. Jay says, I know you've said before, but what were the demo bosses' HP? That's actually a good question. I can pull that up right now. Let's see here. So when I last worked on them, Skull Splitter's health, Skull Splitter's max HP was 650, and Matt Smith's max HP was 500. Now, those max HP values for both of these bosses are definitely subject to change because the amount of XP being earned has been changed substantially to make it so that there's a lot more XP to earn up front. So you'll notice, for example, that Mad Smith is now worth 12,000 XP experience points. Same thing with Skull Splitter, and that is reflecting the change in the amount of XP that the basic enemy types are worth by default. So if I were to go back to the Central Well, the new XP amounts, for those who are curious, so whenever the next patch for Heartwell comes out, I don't know when that'll be because, again, as you can see, there's still quite a bit to implement, but the new XP values are 100 for rattlesnakes, 175 for cabrattles, and cobras are 120. So in essence, most enemies had their amount of XPs increased by a factor of about 5, and bosses were about a factor of 6. Now, to compensate for that, as I've said before, I have been working on designing some second phases for both of the tutorial bosses, in addition to increasing their health. Now, I haven't increased their health yet because I still need to kind of figure out what the expected damage range is going to be for a player with these new XP amounts. But once I figure that out, I'll adjust the HP accordingly, and as for the second phases, they won't be too complicated, but they'll definitely at least add another layer of difficulty to the bosses to be more commensurate with the tools that the player will have available with the amount of XP they're earning. Now, where were we? Oh, yes. Your physical damage caps out at 525, so you can't one-hit the Axemen yet. I mean, are you sure about that, Jay? Are you absolutely sure about that? Are you sure there isn't a certain other way of increasing damage besides just raw physical damage? Well, actually, I guess, to be fair, it would be kind of luck based, but what I'm getting at is Heartwell is a game that has critical hits. Oh, 350 times 1.5 for crit. That's, I mean, I'd have to be 1.5 for crit unless it's a weapon that you can increase the crit damage for. Though I guess that wouldn't be the case for the which weapon are you thinking of? Are you thinking of the Fist J, or are you thinking of the thinking of the Tomahawks? Ah, you're thinking of Fist. Ah, okay. Well, I think with the Tomahawks, let me pull up in the Tomahawks. So, yeah, so with Wrath of the Ironhawk and Fracture Frenzy, and then just upgrading a lot in like damage and precision, you could probably get a pretty high amount of, well, relatively high amount of damage. You tap base damage and finesse, so you just need to up your strength. Ah, I see. Fair enough. Yeah, that's so it is wild to think of just how strong you can make even like the fists. Like just a base damage of 350 for fists, my goodness. Though the irony is, if you know, like if in terms of like just dealing high amounts of damage for the tutorial weapons, you haven't fought either boss yet because you want to one punch them both. Oh, you're doing a one-shot challenge. Okay, that's interesting. Well, I'd say at that point you're definitely going to have to rely on crits, because without it, good luck. I feel like, I mean, is that 350 accounting for the Holy Hands feat? Because I feel like I've never actually, I guess I never really have calculated out how much the max damage would be with it. I'm assuming it is, but something to think about. I mean, obviously the highest damaging weapon in the demo is the axe, but that's primarily because the axe has one very specific feat that makes crit damage go through the roof. 160 light, 190 physical. Ah, gotcha. Okay. Got that at a total of 350. Well, I applaud you for trying to go for like a one-punch build. So I would say your best bet is, at least in the game's current state, is to try to one-shot Matt Smith. Because for Matt Smith, you own, at least in the game's current state, it's only, I think it's only 500 health. And then once you get the once you have the Tomahawks, then perhaps the Tomahawks might be able to reach a higher damage threshold than the Fist can. And they definitely can reach a much higher crit threshold, so that would potentially give you a means to possibly one-hit the Skull Splitter. At least in the game's current state. We got that. We got that. We'll go on over here. Sample cargo hole. If you match critical high, you get a 30% crit, but you're not farming all at speed because the weapon's already level 53. Fair. So I know I ran the calculations in the spreadsheet. So how much at speed do you need to level up those fists at this point, Jay? Like just to go up one singular level. $53.54 is 8,454 speed. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, with the amount of XP the enemies are worth currently as opposed to after the patch, that would definitely take a while. Character level 66 to 67, 6,481. That also sounds about right. Here, there's that. Okay. Line 285. Oh, that works. Line 286. Line 288. 289. You know, something else I realized, chat. This is currently dev stream number, I think like 88 or something. Which means, I think that means this year sometime we'll hit dev stream number 100. That's wild. Jay says, you have this idea from Final Fantasy XIV, but maybe weapons should level a bit faster until they catch up with already leveled weapons. It makes staying out in new gear less of a grind. That's an interesting idea, but I don't think it would really quite make sense with Heartwell's theming. Because, in effect, wisdom is what allows you to, well, level up anything faster, but especially the weapons. So, and in terms of, like, saying, okay, but if I have a really strong weapon, I'd like it to catch up with the already leveled weapons, my counter-argument to that is, if you have a really strong weapon, that will allow you to defeat stronger enemies, and more importantly, stronger bosses. And so, even just defeating a single strong boss would net you a ton of XP, which you could then use to radically level up a different weapon that's brand new. So, I mean, personally, I just think between the Wisdom XP system and the between the Wisdom XP system, especially, and just how high that can get, I think that will more, and also just the amount of XP that some bosses will be worth. I think that should be more than sufficient to allow weapons to at least get to a good state very quickly, especially as you get later in the game. Now, in saying that, there is something I do want to implement in some capacity in Heartwell that Souls games tend to not do. And that is, I want to implement some way for at least some of the bosses to actually be fought again. What I mean by that is, in most Souls games, if you want to fight a boss again, you have to start a new playthrough, or do a New Game Plus cycle or something like that. But in Heartwell, my thought is, if you get far enough into the game, I think there should be some way to rebattle at least some of the bosses. So that way, not only can you experience a boss fight that you really like again and again, but it could also provide a way for people who want to grind to have a bit more fun with it. Because let's be real, chat. If you want to level stuff up, do you really want to be fighting the same like basic enemies over and over and over and over again monotonously? like to farm for XP, you can. Like, in most Souls games, you can do that. It does get boring after a while. Or would be more fun to be like, ah, man, okay, I'm getting towards the end game, I want to level up my weapons, I'll go fight this boss again, and this boss again, and this boss again, you know, something like that. Like, in my eyes, that'd be a lot more fun, personally. But it would definitely not be something that would be accessible until a bit later in the game. The manifest remembers the trials you faced, and through reflection you may grow stronger. Again, interesting idea. I have some thoughts on how I'd implement it, but I don't want to say exactly how for spoiler reasons. But just know that that is something that's in the back of my head, is having some way to at least refight some of the bosses. Since I think that would just at least once again give players kind of a bit more choice in terms of how they level up, how they grow stronger. That's also just another thing that I wish more Souls games did, is like, man, if you have like that one boss fight that you really, really like, it's a shame that you have to kind of go through an entire another like new game cycle before you can get to experience that again. Boss rush is always fun. I agree. But I mean, even outside of a boss rush, it's like if I wanted to fight Malenia again in Elden Ring, I would have to start a new playthrough or a new, whether it's a brand new game or a new game plus, and I would just have to go through so many dungeons just to get the opportunity to fight her once more again. So that's definitely something I've been thinking about. And another thing, more of a quality of life thing, but I do intend to add some kind of simple UI that lets the player know whether their current player stat, melee weapon, or ranged weapon has enough XP to level up, so that way you don't have to just constantly be opening and closing the manifest to check for that. Now, where are we? All right. The Pantheon Hollow Knight was perfect. You can fight 3 different difficulties of every boss variant, and there are tiers of boss rushes as you're still. Interesting. Yeah, I never got far enough in Hollow Knight. I never got far enough in Hollow Knight to reach the Pantheon, but that does sound interesting. That also kind of makes me think in a way of, I think it's the Final Fantasy VII remake, or the Part 1 remake, that like had like the little like digital arena you could go to fight certain enemies or bosses, and they might have different variants of them, or like different difficulty settings. Definitely sounds similar to that, in a sense. Oh, speaking of boss fights, though, chat, for those who were here last week, we finally managed to finish our bow-only challenge run of the Elden Ring DLC, and that means we beat the final boss of the DLC. And all in all, I think it was a fun boss fight. Definitely quite challenging, but still not as fun or as challenging or interesting as Malenia was. Like, legitimately, Malenia is, like, the level of quality and relative difficulty that Malenia provides is the kind of thing I would hope I could achieve with at least one of my bosses in Heartwell. Artemis would be proud, indeed. But seriously though, that boss fight has so many good ideas that I like, it definitely leaves me feeling inspired with, okay, if I were to craft like the hardest or one of the hardest bosses in this game, what kinds of things should I be thinking about? And my mind just keeps going back to Malenia and just a lot of the good ideas that are in that fight. Now changing gears to other development processes. So I was talking about level design and how I have a book of graphing paper that I use to essentially write out different level ideas. There's a couple of reasons for that. So one is that when you're developing a video game, you're going to be in front of a computer screen a lot, and that's honestly not very good for your eyes in the long run. So the fact that I'm doing, like, you know, a top-down 2D sort of game meant that graphing paper is actually a decent stand-in in terms of like mapping things out. And it's something that's analog as opposed to digital, so you're not looking in front of a screen, so that helps kind of ease the eye strain a bit. But in addition to that, what I like to do when I'm using the graphing paper is I like to kind of work on a level, and then after I draw a level, I'll play a little bit of Dark Souls 2. So in essence, I'm doing my own like offline sort of simple challenge run of Dark Souls 2, in this case just a no healing flask challenge run. But because the way Dark Souls 2 works, if you defeat like the normal enemies in an area 12 times, they stop respawning. So in essence, I go to each area and then I have a simple rule: either defeat each enemy in the area once or get defeated yourself. And after either of those things happen, I stop and work on a level, and then I repeat the process over and over again. And not only has this led me to create a lot of potential levels for Heartwell, it has also allowed me to gain a greater appreciation for Dark Souls 2, and simultaneously learn more about the levels than I ever would have known otherwise. Now, as for the level design process itself, I essentially first identify different types of enemies that might be in a particular area, and then different gameplay mechanics that might be in a particular area, and then I figure out different combinations of those things of varying difficulties in order to develop my levels. The goal, of course, being to have at least 20 different we'll call them rooms per major dungeon section. And so far, that seems to be working quite well. It's essentially just an expansion upon the process that I did to design Heartwell, since with Heartwell, there aren't really any new gameplay mechanics beyond just there are doors that you can open with keys and levers and stuff like that, very basic things. So coming up with like different scenarios with just those 3 basic enemy types, the rattlesnake, cabral, and cobra, was a fun development process. But with the other areas, there'll be, perhaps additional little gameplay mechanics in addition with the enemy types that are introduced there. As a very basic example, one particular area has an obstacle we'll call barbed wire, and I'm sure you know what barbed wire is. It's essentially if you walk in the area where barbed wire is, you will take a certain amount of damage over time. So that would be a gameplay mechanic in essence, since now it's kind of like an obstacle. And then, having situations that involve barbed wire with certain enemy types or not can definitely make the development process go faster. Because I'll definitely say this, it's a lot easier to come up with different combinations of enemies and or gameplay mechanics when you have more of them. So, again, with the tutorial dungeon, I really only have 3 enemy types to work with. Whereas with some of these other dungeons, I still tend to have about 3 enemy types to work with. But at least I then have the gameplay mechanics to kind of introduce here and there with them as well, and that definitely helps with the speed up the development process a bit. In terms of idea generation. Alright, got that. Got that. And we got that. There we go. Oh, wait. I'm getting a little overzealous here. These are all laser 2, not laser 1. Yep, that's why it's important to double check things, chat. Or else you might end up with circumstances that are not what you expect. There we go. Like that. Jay asks, what are some interesting enemy mechanics you're working on or have in mind? Great question. All right, so in terms of interesting enemy mechanics, so for enemy types, I'll just go over the ones in Carrier Forest right now because those are the ones I've been working the most with the levels so far. So the most basic, so the way I structure like the three major, we'll say thirds of Elefoptria, those being Carrier Forest, the Polster Highlands, and Dora the Coast. The idea is each of them are meant to introduce 9 quote-unquote normal enemies. And the idea is that because of the branching path nature of Heartwell's level design, if I'm, let's say, in Carrier Forest, for example, I have my first branching path there, where I can either go north or south. And north is a different, we'll say, dungeon than south would be. And then after that dungeon, there would be a boss fight, and then there would be essentially a second dungeon, so a second half to that area, if you will, and then another boss fight. So in essence, there are essentially quote-unquote 4 dungeons in each area, but they go in, they're in opposing directions. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring that up because, like I said, 9 enemies, we'll say 4 dungeons, or if you want to think of it as like 2 very large dungeons with like each having a first half and a second half, depending on how you want to look at it. But the idea is, in each of those, we'll say dungeons or half of a large dungeon / section, there are 2 new enemies that are introduced. So that would bring us up to a total of 8, and enemies from a previous section can be used in a later section. So let's say North Section 1 has these 2 enemy types introduced. Then the section after that can have 2 more enemy types introduced, and vice versa. Now, that's only 8. Where's the 9th? So the 9th is what I'll call a universal enemy type. So think of this as like your most basic enemy type that is in all 4 of these areas, and can be like something that can be used in various different contexts. Now, with that background in mind, Carrier Forest. The universal enemy type in Carrier Forest is the Stone-Skin Rattlesnake. Now, you might say, okay, it's a rattlesnake, so it's not going to move from its central location, right? Correct. So what's different? So whereas the normal rattlesnake is really easy to defeat, doesn't take that many hits, relatively low HP, and in terms of like relative threat damage wise, not that big of a threat because they can't move and they only hit like a small arc when they do their melee swipe. Their windup is very obvious. The Stone-Skin Rattlesnake is a bit different. So instead of doing a melee swipe, the Stone-Skin Rattlesnake will actually smash the ground with their tail, and this will create essentially a shockwave around themselves. So instead of hitting like a small little arc in front of them, they will essentially hit an area around themselves that's a lot larger than the normal rattlesnake's attack window. So already we have a rattlesnake that's a much larger threat than the normal rattlesnake. But in addition, I call it the stone stem rattlesnake because they have much higher defenses, especially to physical damage. So the weapons you get, from the tutorial dungeon, or even just your base weapons, with a couple of exceptions, they mostly deal physical damage. So if you try to defeat these stone stem rattlesnakes, it'll take a lot of attacks because they have just high defenses that you have not had to deal with yet. And because of those high defenses to the damage types you're likely to have at the start of the game, the stone stem rattlesnakes essentially are treated more like an obstacle, at least initially, until you get essentially different weapons or come up with a strategy to defeat them more efficiently, at which point then you can treat them like enemies again. So that's more of an introduction, if you will, to defenses and things of that nature. But that's the basic enemy type. What about some of the more interesting enemy types? So if one goes to let me think about them. A while ago, chat, when I was messing around with pathfinding, you might remember that there was a time where I had these little squares that would move towards the player, but only when they had a line of sight on the player. And otherwise, they would simply not move. So I actually came up with an enemy type idea for that. It's called the Pictus Blade. And what the Pictus Blade is imagine a floating drone that has these 4 blades that kind of circle around them in a circular fashion, much like a saw. The idea of the Pictus Blade is that if the player is within the line of sight of them, they will just move straight towards the player, but they have no pathfinding. They only know how to move towards the player in like a perfectly straight line. And if you break line of sight, they will stop coming after you. So this actually creates an enemy type where you can kind of maneuver them around an area if you were able to make good use of lines of sight. But if they get really close to you, they will just do like a constant amount of melee damage. Another enemy type is the sentry gun. That, of course, functions much like a sentry gun you would see in Team Fortress 2. In essence, if you get in line of sight, there will be a short wind-up followed by just a heavy barrage of ranged attacks, something that you cannot out-damage simply by trying to face tank it like you could with the battles. Let's see, there's the fly trap enemies that are so chat, I want you to imagine a Venus flytrap. So they stay in one location. They do a melee swipe much like the rattlesnake does, but they do have a bit more reach than the rattlesnake, but otherwise are still stationary opponents. So you might ask, okay, Antomicx, isn't that just fairly simple to deal with if they're once again a stationary melee opponent? In theory, yes, except for one very critical detail. These fly traps are invisible until they're doing an attacking animation. So in other words, you have a stationary melee enemy type that is essentially hidden until you either bump into them or search for them yourself. So I'm just thinking, like, the moment like that enemy type is introduced, and like the moment the player realizes that enemy type exists, definitely don't make them a bit more wary of just walking into open spaces, shall we say. There's an enemy that kind of looks like a large dandelion called a pterozactum. That's, again, stationary opponent, but What's different, and it uses a ranged projectile, but this ranged projectile is a bit different. So it's kind of like this floating seed pod, if you will, that will float slowly towards the player, and once it gets too close, it will explode. But the unique thing about the seed pod, a fool eater, exactly. But the unique thing about the Pterozactum seed pods is they do not care about what elevation you are at. And typically, Pterozactums will often be placed in highly elevated areas, meaning that they can hit you regardless of elevation. And you have like this slow-moving, explosive projectile coming your way. That'll definitely make for some interesting platforming and or navigation moments, I think. Will also create an interest in trying to destroy the Pterozactum, finding a way to destroy a Pterozactum as quickly as possible. Let's see, what else do we have? There's the SAM turret, or the surface-to-air missile turret, that, like the Pterozactum, they can hit a player regardless of elevation, but unlike the Pterozactum, essentially, the SAM turret's attack functions similarly to Mad Smith's brick tossing attack. So in essence, it fires a missile up into the air, and then after some time, the missile comes down near where the player is standing. But this is just a normal enemy type, and because of how it works, again, they can hit you at any elevation. They do not need direct line of sight. You do not want to mess with a SAM turret. Like, if you essentially, like, especially if a SAM turret is active, that is like completely out of line of sight from the player, good luck. Just keep moving and hope for the best. Let's see, what else is there? There's the Pictus Lacerator, which is like the Pictus Blade, except more heavily armored, a bit more aggressive, and actually has pathfinding. So, floating saw blade kind of enemy that'll chase you down. And, let's see. There's the Isoptera drone. Not like a robot, but Isoptera is like, think like giant flying termite. And what it will do, if you guys have ever played Crosscode, you'll probably remember like I think it's called like the Verpentines or something. They're like this flying almost vulture-like enemy in Crosscode, where they will fly above you out of reach and then kind of dive down at you for a set amount of time to do like a diving melee attack. I wanted to do something similar. So the way the Isoptera drone works is it'll essentially fly around out of, at an elevation higher than what you're at, and then essentially try to do a diving melee attack to try and attack you. And it's only during and after that diving melee attack that the Isoptera drone will be at an elevation where you could hit it with a melee attack or a planar ranged attack. So, the Vault Turbine, that's right. So it's similar in idea to that. And then, of course, we have the Isoptera Worker, which is, think of it like a slow-moving, crawling termite that has lots of defenses and has at least decent pathfinding like a Cobra has. So, whereas the Cobra is moderately fast, but doesn't have a lot of health, this would be kind of having a bit more defenses, a bit more health, kind of that sort of thing. Also known as that darn bird, exactly. Yep, same idea. And mind you, chat, these enemy types I've all mentioned are like the simplest of the enemy types, because they're for Carrier Force, which is, at least in theory, supposed to be the quote-unquote easiest of the three regions in Elephoptera. I say quote-unquote because I'm not going to make it easy, but I'm just saying relative to each other. So, does that give you guys at least a decent idea of kind of where my head's at in terms of some of the basic enemy type ideas? Yeah. If you're curious as to what some of the other enemy types will be, I will say this. In the opening for Heartwell, neat, can't wait to die to them repeatedly. Well said, Jay, well said. It's like, and for those who are curious of what some of the other enemy type ideas will be, just know that if you played the Heartwell demo and you've seen like the opening, the opening before the main menu, there is one particular frame that shows a bunch of different types of, shall we say, metal monsters. And I can confidently say that each of those are intended to be enemy types in the game. Or at least basic enemy types in the game. So, if you, like, I'm sure you know which frame I'm talking about. But, like, the ones that, I mean, some of them were even, like, mentioned before in the demo. Like, I think it was Jerja who mentioned the skeletons, for example. So those will be a basic enemy type. Let's see. I'm trying to remember which other enemies are shown in that image. There's the Cyclopeans, which look like these giant metal cyclopses. There's the, well, giant relatively speaking, so tall metal cyclopses. A floating castle of Trio. No, not that. Let's see, there's the enemies that look kind of like these, kind of like those sort of metallic owls. I'm forgetting what, I think they're called Matua, but I'll have to double check on that. So those will be an enemy type. And then of course, there were those floating pumpkin looking things. Those are called Jactor Burners. And those will also be an enemy type in the game. Let's see here. I was looking for laser. Yeah, laser. There we go. All right, we're getting there, chat. We're getting there. Robustan. Yeah. Another question you might be having, chat, is will there be a point where I start showing off developing boss fights on stream? The short answer is yes, though I'm not sure exactly when that would be, because that's probably still a while off, given that I have a lot of foundational stuff to do here. But in terms of like where I would draw the line in terms of what bosses I'd be willing to show versus what bosses I wouldn't want to show on stream, the line's going to be there's a certain point in the story where we'll say things will start happening like a lot in terms of like the story will really start picking up. So think like if you play Crosscode, that point in time would be when Leia goes to Vermilion Wasteland. So like it's like anyone who's played Crosscode knows that like the moment that Leia goes to Vermilion Wasteland, the story really picks up. So there will be a point in the story that is akin to that kind of significance in the Crosscode story. And essentially any bosses that are designed to occur after that point are bosses I would not want to show on dev stream for very obvious spoiler reasons. But any bosses before that are completely fair game. So, and that's like the majority of them. Alright, there's that. Okay. There we go. Alrighty. Yep. This is that one. Ooh. Okay. I think we're 2/3 of the way there. That's good. Alrighty. There we go. All right. Yeah, in terms of other things that are new, next week we'll be starting a new challenge run. That, of course, will be for Trails in the Sky. The rule set will be exactly the same as has been for Trails from Zero and Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. So, can we beat the game on Nightmare mode without using any of... while only using starring equipment? So that means any weapons, armor, or other kinds of equipment or accessories that are not purely cosmetic must not be changed for the entire playthrough. So that means essentially the weakest armor, the weakest weapons, all that we have to work with for the entire playthrough. And that was definitely a very fun and interesting challenge in Trails from Zero, especially because the orbments in that game are percentage based as opposed to value based, as they are in Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. So that definitely made the stats a lot worse later in the game. And if Trails from the Sky is anything like Trails from Zero, it'll probably be similarly difficult, if not even more difficult. But I'm very much looking forward to it, though. There we go. And for those who are wondering why I'm working on these sound effects code here, even though this is a testing frame, that's to make sure that in case we have to copy any of this code over to other frames for like future levels and such, we want to make sure that code is as accurate as possible to reduce the amount of bugs. Oh, no, it's there. Huh. I clearly had the foresight for that, at least. Okay. Oh, not for that one, though. There we go. Jay says, you just did the math. You need to have 84 strength to one-hit Stealth Splitter with a crit. That is going to be painful. Well, looks like you got some grinding ahead of you, Jay. I mean, I commend you for the effort. You're using what you have available at the moment. "84 strength. One punch Dorothy." Just Jay, if you do end up one punching Stealth Splitter, I think that'd be really cool to see. It'd be really, really funny. Just literally one punch. The all damage is double if enemy health is below half. It's taunting me on every level up stream. That's true. That's true. But that's kind of like, the thing is like, that would be great for like a normal playthrough. But if you're just trying to defeat everything in one hit, that's pointless, right? It's normally such a good buff. Oh, I agree, because again, it gives kind of Fists a bit of utility. Because, I mean, Fists in general have a lot of utility. Because even though they might individually not do that much damage, the idea of, like, having a really fast attacking weapon that deals double damage when an opponent is below half health, like, that's, you know, that gives it, like, utility as sort of like a finishing kind of thing. it also can kind of like give you a sense of momentum once you get an enemy below half health, especially if it's a boss, because it's like, okay, they're below half health. Now's the time to go ham, so to speak. Okay, there we go. Jay says, healing, ammo regen, first fist attacks ignore resistance. It's a great support supplemental and can be built for high DPS. Indeed. Well, high DPS, relatively speaking. There are going to be weapons, obviously, later in the game that will out DPS fists by a lot. But that should be expected. It's, fists are the basic melee weapon, the most basic melee weapon. I'm not saying that this will be bad per se, I'm just saying there will be, at least in terms of DPS, there will definitely be better options later in the game. But yeah, as for some of those other things, especially with like the healing and ammo regen stuff, that's, definitely provides a lot of support utility. It's like I can genuinely see an argument for someone running fists if they want to do more of like a primarily ranged playthrough, because, Gifted Hands is a really good special as just a passive thing. Yeah, and while and while it will be difficult to make every all 60 weapons feel like they have an equal amount of say, I'm going to try my darndest to make sure they're at least unique and hopefully each have a niche to fill of some kind. So that way that there's a lot of replayability and all the weapons feel like they have a reason to exist. So yeah. Alright, there we go. There's that. Hey, Catherine Nelson, thanks for dropping by. How's it going? Welcome. We are in the midst. We're getting close to finishing the audio updates. it will be my bedtime soon enough. But for now, development time. Jay says they're defeating many, many, many snets. Yep. But no, Coppernickel, so you have to understand, Jay is doing a challenge run of the demo. Jay is trying to defeat Skull Splitter in one hit, which means he needs a lot of which means that Jay needs a lot of stats. But snets are friend. Snets are not friend in Heartwell. Snets are dangerous in Heartwell. Well, why don't you play the Heartwell demo, Copper Nicholson, and then tell me the Snet is friend? Snet is important part of ecosystem. I agree, but that doesn't necessarily mean Snet is friend. Jay says, if they didn't physically block doors I needed, you would like to do a Snets Must Live run? I mean, honestly, Jay, you could. Like, you can, like, it is possible to escape Bardoff Well without defeating any enemies. Like, if I am able to implement Steam achievements in Heartwell, and that is something I would like to do in the long run, if possible, one of the achievements I would definitely consider is an achievement that basically says escape Bardoff Well without defeating any enemies or bosses. Minimum snets percent. There is a way to do it. Like, it's just you have to be really good at platforming and managing your healing. But there is a way to do it though. Like, I'm sure, like, since you played the demo in great detail, Jay, I'm sure you can probably see how it could be done. It's just, it's something that will take definitely a bit of platforming. Minimum snacks percent. That should also be a speedrun category. I'm just trying to imagine people trying to escape the tutorial dungeon without defeating a single enemy and trying to do it as fast as possible. That would be fun to watch. Or also even just a speedrun of the demo, just people trying to get through the tutorial dungeon as fast as possible. I mean, the fact that there's 3 exits means you could genuinely make an argument for any one of them. You mean with the external apps, you just walk out the wall and beat the game in 20 seconds? Yeah, but that's no fun. Not with external apps. No major glitches. Just like actually playing the game within the confines of how it is defined. No external apps. I'd be curious to see which of the 3 exits ends up winning out the speedrun race, so to speak. Because if you think about it, it really comes down to the argument of which is faster. Defeating one of the bosses as quickly as possible and then running for the exit to Terria Forest. Running through most of Heartwell as quickly as possible to just run for the exits to Polister Highlands. Or trying to grind as efficiently as possible in order to break through the wooden barricade and take the exit to Dorada Coast. I can see like a logical argument for each of those options. It's just a question of which one would actually be the most, the fastest way to escape. Once again, Copper Nettleson, I have no idea how to add that, so it's going to be up to the community to mod things. As like I said, I do not know how to add that or support that with the software that I have. Well, Copper Nicholson, if you'd like to do that, then I encourage you to see what possibilities there are with modding and try to find some way to implement that. Jay says, you still look at now and then, but Clickteam is weird and doesn't have the biggest community compared to other engines. It's definitely possible, very confusing. Yeah, that's true. It's a shame that Clickteam doesn't have as large a community as other games engines, because I genuinely I genuinely love this game engine. Like, let me put it this way. I've been working on Heartwell in essence since March of 2020, so it's been almost 5 years since I started working on this game. I would not have chosen this game engine if I didn't think it could do the job, so to speak. Like, this game engine, like, I have been able to really mold it to what I need to create the vision I have for this game. Like, it is really, really flexible if you know how to use it. So yeah, if this game ends up inspiring people to really try to figure out how to mod like Fusion games in general more, that'd be a cool side effect as well. Like that'd be really neat to see. Alright. There's the 2. Let's see here. Jay says you're Vayne defeating Mad Smith now for the XP or wait until you can defeat Stealth Splayer at the same time. I mean, I guess that is kind of up to you, Jay, but there's arguments for and against that. If you have enough damage to defeat, you know, Mad Smith in one hit right now, might be worth it. Not just for the XP, but also for just to have the tomahawks as a weapon. Since I think the tomahawks have higher damage potential than fists do, or at least I think they do, just based off of the amount of extra scaling you can get, as well as the crit bonus. So to the first question, I mean, you've seen in the demo Copper Nicholson, there are Jerja and Gideoni are both Bardoffs. Jay says you feel committed to one punch over just on hit. Fair. So it has to be the fists. Fair enough. And as for your second question, Copper Nicholson, no. So here's a fun fact, chat. Do you want to know why it's called Heartwell? Or do you want to know why, so the reason why it's called Heartwell is because Bardoff actually means wolf. Who is the Bard of Heartwell? That is not quite that. No, Bardoff is another term for a wolf. So in essence, it is saying Wolfwell. And as for Jerja and Gideoni, they're called Bardoffs because, again, Bardoff means wolf. All right, let's go on down here. If it's the Wolfwell, why so many Snets? Just saying, you know the lore, but it will forever be Snetswell. Fair enough. Snetswell. Snetswell. All right, so I think I've finished adjusting all the sound effects volume. So now we go over here. We notice this made no noise. This made no noise. No noise. Perfect. Silence is exactly what we're going for, so now everything's adjusted correctly. See? Ta-da! No, it took a while, but that's all been fixed. Perfect. Also, fun fact about these bars here, chat. So these are actually the same bars that are used, like for some of the bars here. It's simply just changing the positioning of them and the code for how they display. So that's just another way I'm trying to reuse the same objects in order to make the most of what I have here. In fact, a lot of what you see here is very much the art of reusing what you have. So test bosses you see on this page, for example, get reused here, and so on and so forth. Alrighty. And with that, chat, I think this will be a good spot to wrap things up. I will say tonight's stream definitely went in a different direction than I thought. I thought I was going to do a bit more programming for, I thought I was definitely going to do a bit more programming for, like, just some of the other, like, button options here, like full stream mode and such, but, you know, upon discovering that bug with the sound effects on the test frame, I figured that was more important to fix since that was a lot more fundamental. But not to worry, chat. I'll continue doing work off stream, and next step stream will obviously be in 2 weeks. But for next week, we'll be doing a challenge run of Trails on the Sky, of course. Now, anyway, if you're watching this on Twitch, feel free to stick around for raid. But if you're watching this on YouTube and you like what you saw, please consider subscribing on YouTube. It's free to subscribe on YouTube. You don't always change your mind later, and it's a great way to show support. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope you have an amazing night.